Good evening, everyone. Welcome to lecture one on structural organization in animals. So, basically, in this unit, we will be dealing with what is the composition of different structures that are present in any animal system. For example, we know that our body is made up of cells and how these cells are further arranged to form different structures like different organs, for example, kidney, etc., in our human body or in any animal system. So we will be dealing with different structural organization. And for this, we will be first starting with the basic introduction of what is the composition or what is the organization of different structures in any system. So firstly, at any basic level, it is the chemical level. That is, the body is made up of certain chemicals. These chemicals may be organic. Like for example, we have carbon structures, right? For example, carbohydrates. These carbohydrates are made up of carbon, hydrogen, etc. So this carbon is an organic molecule, and this carbohydrate will be an organic molecule. Similarly, it has some inorganic components also. Like for example, we have sodium, potassium, etc. in our cells. The next level of organization is the cellular level of organization. So this chemical level of organization acts on the cellular level of organization, and the cells are the basic unit of life. So these cells further divide and they acquire a certain function in order to provide the living system and entity. And then we have the tissue level of organization. So after cellular level of organization, the next level of organization is a tissue level of organization, in which certain cells which have similar function or similar structures are grouped together to perform a certain function. So then these tissues are composed of cells that may be same or that may be different, that combines together to form a certain function. Then these tissues further form organ level. So various types of tissues are present in a certain organ. For example, kidney is an organ, or we can say stomach, for example, is an organ that performs various functions due to the presence of various kinds of tissues. For example, it has cilia. For example, if I talk about intestine, so intestine has cilia. So it has ciliated epithelium that helps in the absorption. It has microvilli that helps in the absorption of the food. It has certain digestive or secretive properties that secrete certain enzymes that help in the digestion of the food. After organ level of organization, we have an organ system level of organization. For example, here we have shown the organs of the excretory system. So the kidney, urinary bladder, etc., ureter or urethra, etc., forms the part of a larger unit, which is the organ system level of organization, forming the urinary system. Similarly, if I talk about digestive system, so we have esophagus, then we have stomach, intestine, anus as a part of digestive system. So various different organs combine to form a particular system. For example, circulatory system that consists of heart, arteries, veins that helps in the circulation of the blood in the body. So these different organs combine to form a larger unit, which is the organ system level of organization. Then after this, we have the complete organism. So these different organ systems, like for example, excretory system, reproductive system, urinary system, for example, etc., combines to form a complete organism that consists of various different organ systems, or we can say that consists of various organ system level of organization, forming a complete unit, which is known as the organism. So starting with the cell chemicals, which make up the body, that may be divided into two major categories, as I mentioned, that can be inorganic or organic. Then we have the next level of organization, which is the cells. So the cells are the smallest living units that can perform the independent function. So that have the structure and function. So they are the smallest unit that have a particular structure or a function. Then we have a tissue. So a tissue is a group of cells with similar structure and function. Then, as I mentioned, we have an organ. So organ is a group of tissues It is a larger unit than tissues. It is a group of tissues which are arranged precisely to perform or to accomplish a certain function. For example, as I mentioned, the urinary system. So, in consists of organs like kidney, urinary bladder. So, there is a precise arrangement of various organs like kidney, urinary bladder that allows to perform a particular function of urination. Then we have the organ system in the last. So, an organ system is a group of organs, like, for example, the kidney or the urinary bladder, that contribute to a particular function. As I mentioned, for example, the excretion of nitrogenous waste outside the human body. So, these are the different level of organizations that are present in any organism. Starting with the basic chemical level, further going up to cellular level, then tissue level, organ system level, and then the complete organism. So, in this chapter, we will be mainly dealing with the tissue level of organization, and then we will further dwell into the organ and organ system level of organization. So, starting with the tissue level of organization, so there are various kinds of tissues that are present in any body. It can broadly be classified into 4 types. The first one is the epithelial tissue. Second one is the connective tissue. Third one is the muscle tissue, and fourth is the nerve tissue. So the epithelial tissues are the ones which are present on the that forms the epithelial lining, that is on the surface. So they form the surface lining. So they cover or line the body surfaces. Some are capable of producing the secretions. So they can be further modified to produce the secretion and are known as the glands. So the glands are nothing but they are the epithelial tissues that are modified for the secretion, right? So these epithelial tissues are present on the surface. So what will be their function? Obviously, their function will be the protection, since they are present on the surface. So they are mostly present on the surface and their function is to protect the cells. And some of them, as I mentioned, are capable of producing the secretions and performing the specific functions. So such organs are known as glands. For example, we have sweat glands, we have sebaceous glands, etc. that produce certain secretions, and these secretions have some specific functions as well. So these are nothing but they are the modified epithelial tissues that are modified for the secretion. Next, we have the connective tissue. As the name suggests, these help in maintaining the connection between the cells and in providing the support to the body. So they connect and support the parts of the body. Some of them transport or store the materials. For example, blood. So it connects all over the different organs. Then we have bone, we have cartilage that supports. So they provide the support system. This is a fluid connective tissue. Blood is a fluid connective tissue. Bone and cartilage provides the support. Adipose tissue, which is present in the fat, are examples of this group. Then next we have muscles. So these are specialized for the contraction and relaxation and therefore help in the movement. So therefore, by the process of contraction, regulated contraction and relaxation, it helps in bringing out the movement. So our skeletal muscles and the heart are examples of muscle tissues. For example, we have different types of muscles like striated muscles, etc. So these different muscles are present in our skeletal system or in the heart, and they form the part of muscle tissue. Next, we have nerve tissues. So nerve tissues are specialized to generate and transmit the electrochemical impulse. For example, the neurons, right? So the neurons are made up of the nerve tissues, or are the examples like brain and the optic nerves that supplies to the eyes and are example of the nerve tissues. One of the very important property of the nerve tissue is they do not have the power of regeneration. So they lack the power of regeneration. That is why once a neuron or any damage to the nerve happen, it is difficult or it is nearly impossible to regenerate the tissues there, And therefore, a person, for example, if I consider optic nerves, so if there is any damage that happened to the optic nerves, then the person becomes blind because it does not have the power of regeneration. While epithelial tissues are the one that have a very high power of regeneration. So epithelial tissues have a very high power of regeneration. While if I talk about the nerve tissues, these nerve tissues, which are composed of various nerves, do not have the power of regeneration, and therefore it is difficult to regenerate, or once if it get damaged, it is nearly impossible to treat that because of the lack of regeneration in the nerve tissues. So in today's class, we will be dealing with the epithelial tissues, and then we will be further taking up with the other tissues like connective tissues, muscle tissues, and nerve tissues. So this is another chart showing the division of the animal tissues. As I mentioned, epithelial tissues provide the protection by covering the different organs or the organ system. It can further be divided into various types like squamous, which are flattened epithelia, cuboidal, which is cubical in shape, like this. These are cubical in shape. These are flattened, squamous, cubical. Then we have columnar. Ciliated is kind of modification of columnar that have the cilia on the surface. And then we have glandular, that have the secretory functions that includes the glands. Right? Next is the muscle tissues. As I mentioned, it helps in the movement and the locomotion. So it can be of three types: striated, non-striated, and cardiac muscle tissues, which is present in the heart muscles. Next, we have connective tissues that have the function of binding, support, and transport. So there are various kinds of connective tissues. For example, fluid connective tissue that consists of blood and lymph. Skeletal connective tissue that consists of bone and cartilage. Then we have adipose tissue that is the fat. Areolar tissue that consists of air spaces. Then we have supporting tissues which are tendon and ligament. So these tendon and ligaments helps in the joining of bone to bone and bone to muscles respectively. Cartilage and bones are different types of skeletal connective tissue that provides the support. Then we have that provides the strength and support. Then we have fluid connective tissue that consists of blood and the lymph, which is fluid in nature. The next is the nervous tissue. Nervous tissue helps in the control and coordination, and as I mentioned, they lack the power of regeneration. This is an important point. So these are the different kinds of tissues that are present in any animal. So we will be starting with the epithelial tissues. Epithelial tissues are found on the surface. Epi means above, or epi means up on something, right? So they are found on the surface as either coverings, like they may be present on the outer surface, or lining on the inner surface. So on the inner surface, they may be found. So on an inner surface, they are found as a lining, or they may be found on the outer surface as the coverings. Because these tissues do not have their own capillaries, so they lack their own capillaries. Therefore, they receive oxygen and nutrients from the blood supply of the connective tissue beneath them. So usually the structure is like this, that beneath the epithelial tissue, it is the connective tissue that is present. This connective tissue helps in providing the oxygen and blood supply to the epithelial tissues. So these epithelial tissues lack their own blood capillaries. They do not have their own blood supply. Therefore, in order to receive the oxygen and nutrients, they are connected with the connective tissues which are present beneath them. So many epithelial tissues, as I mentioned, are capable of secretion, and they may be called as a glandular epithelium, or simply we can call them as glands. So glands are nothing but they are the epithelial tissues which are capable of secretion of certain substances that have a particular function. So we will see what are glands and what is the further division of glands also in this lecture. But for now, these are the basic points about the epithelial tissues that they are found on the surface. They may be present on the outer surface for the protection, or they may be present on the inner surface as the lining of the tissues. So there are various types of epithelium tissues. Epithelium tissue can further be divided into, can broadly be classified into two types. The first is the simple epithelium. The second one is the compound epithelium. So simple epithelium, as the name suggests, simple means it is easy and it just composed of a single layer of cells. While compound epithelium is a stratified. Stratified means layered. So compound epithelium is a layered epithelium. It consists of two or more cell layers. And what is the function of simple epithelium? It has the function of lining for body cavities, ducts, and tubes. While what is the function of compound epithelium? It has protective function as it does it in our skin. So compound epithelium, for example, usually performs the protective function. It is in the form of layers. What is the advantage that this layer offers is that suppose if the outer layer gets damaged, our internal tissues will not get damaged due to the presence of the other layers. While if, for example, simple epithelium is present on our skin, then what will happen is, if simple epithelium gets damaged by any chance, then it will directly affect the internal tissues. So therefore, the function of the compound epithelium that composed of multiple layers is usually the protection. While what is the function of simple epithelium? Simple epithelium consists of a single layer of cells, and therefore it helps in providing the lining. It acts as a lining for the body cavities, ducts, and the tubes. So simple epithelium, on the basis of the shape or the structure, can further be divided into various types. For example, simple squamous, simple cuboidal, simple columnar, and pseudo-stratified. While if I talk about the compound epithelium can be of two types, non-stretchable and stretchable. So example of non-stretchable is stratified squamous, stratified columnar, stratified cuboidal. While the example of stretchable compound epithelium is the transitional epithelium. So we will see what is the basic characteristic of each of these types of epithelium. Starting with this is the basic example. You can see that this is the squamous epithelium. On the basis of shape, it can be squamous, it can be cuboidal, or it can be columnar. So if it consists of single layer, it will be called as simple squamous, simple cuboidal, or simple columnar. And if it consists of multiple layers, as we can see in this figure, it has multiple layers lying one over the other. So it will be a stratified squamous. Similarly, it can be stratified cuboidal or stratified columnar. So starting with simple squamous epithelium. Simple squamous epithelium, as the name mentioned, is a single layer of flat cells. So it is just a single layer of flat cells forming the simple squamous epithelium. These cells are very thin and they are very smooth, and these are the important physical characteristics of the simple squamous epithelium, that the cells are very thin and very smooth. Alveoli, for example, the air sacs of the lungs are simple squamous epithelium. So you might have seen any figure of the alveoli. So you might have seen the air spaces and the lining of the alveoli, which is very thin. So this alveoli has very much of air space, and the lining is made up of the simple squamous epithelium, which is very thin and smooth. So what will be the advantage of this thin, simple squamous epithelium? And why it is present in the lungs? Because in the lungs, we need to, there is a passage for the oxygen. So more the thickness of the layer, difficult will be the diffusion of the gases, right? So therefore, we need a very thin layer that allows the rapid diffusion. So by remembering just the property, you can remember the sites where these types of epithelium will be present. So since one of the very important property of the simple squamous epithelium is that they are very thin, so it will offer the advantage in the diffusion. So wherever we require the diffusion, rapid diffusion of the gases or the nutrients, what will be present there? Simple squamous epithelium will be present in such linings. For example, in the lungs, so if anyone asks what is the lining of the alveoli that lines the that are present in the lungs. So alveoli that are present in the lungs, what is the function? Their function is the rapid diffusion of the gases. So for this, we need a very thin layer of cells, and we know that simple squamous epithelium has that property that the cell layers are very thin. Cell is very thin. Actually, layer is not present. The cell is very thin, and therefore it helps in the rapid diffusion. So the thinness of the cell permits the diffusion of gases between the air and the blood. Another location of this tissue is in the capillaries. So we have veins, and then we have capillaries. So these capillaries are the ones that enter into any organ. So these capillaries are present, like they enter into any organ and provides the blood. So these are the smallest blood vessels. Capillary walls are only 1 cell thick, which again, as I mentioned, wherever they require the diffusion of any nutrient, gases, or waste product, there we need this thin layer of thin layer of epithelium. So therefore, since capillaries help in the exchange of gases, nutrients, and waste products between the blood and the tissue fluid, they are very thin and they are just 1 cell thick and are made up of simple squamous epithelium, right? The next is the interior surface of capillaries is also very smooth. As I mentioned that these cells are thin and smooth. So the interior surface, which is lined by the simple squamous epithelium, is very smooth. And these cells continue as the lining of the arteries, veins, and the heart. Why this is important? Because it prevents the abnormal blood clotting within the blood vessel due to the roughening of the blood vessels. So the interior of the blood vessels is smooth, and therefore it helps in providing the smooth surface inside the blood vessel and preventing the abnormal blood clotting within the blood vessels. So these are the basic properties of simple squamous epithelium, and these are the sites. For example, they are present in the lungs, alveoli of the lungs. They are present in the inner lining of the capillaries, where the diffusion of gases, nutrients, or any waste product is required. So this is the just basic structure of simple squamous epithelium, where you can see it is not layered. It is just a single cell. It's just a single layer of cells. So we know that a cell consists of a nucleus. It has a cytoplasm which surrounds the nucleus, and it's a cell boundary that is connected. So these different cells are connected with the help of various junctions. That also we will see what are the different junctions. They can be tight junction, they can be gap junctions, etc. This is a figure of hematoxylin and eosine stained section of lungs. So this is a simple squamous epithelium. You can see here it consists of a single layer of cells which are arranged. So this is the alveolar sac, which is the alveolar space which is present in the alveoli. So this is the lung. This is the H&E image of the lung that shows the simple squamous epithelium. And we can see that this layer is very thin, that allows the rapid diffusion of gases. Right? So this is the simple squamous epithelium which is present in the lungs. Next is the stratified squamous epithelium. So we know stratified means in the layers. So if it is present in the form of layers, it will be stratified squamous epithelium. So if many layers are present, it will be stratified squamous epithelium. It consists of many layers of mostly flat cells. Although lower cells are rounded, little bit rounded, mitosis takes place in the lowest layer. So it takes place in the lowest layer. The cells in the lowest layer keep on dividing to produce the new cells to replace those which are worn off on the surface. So if there is any damage on the surface cells, the mitosis that is taking place in the lower layer of cells, keeps on dividing and producing the new cells that continuously replaces the old cells or the cells which are worn off on the surface. So this type of epithelium makes up the epidermis of the skin, where it is called keratinizing because the keratin is produced and the surface cells are dead. So such layer of cells is required on the surface of the skin, because we know that skin is the organ that covers almost all the surface in any animal or in human body, and it plays a major role in the protection, as it is the first organ that usually comes in contact with any compound, or we can say with any chemical or any hazardous material. So this type of epithelium is present in the epidermis of the skin, providing the protection, where if by any case or if by any chance the outer layer gets worn off or gets damaged, the newer cells which are formed by the mitosis of the lower cells gets replaced quickly the cells which are worn off. So stratified squamous epithelium can be keratinizing type, which is present on the skin because of the protein keratin is produced, or it can be non-keratinizing type, for example the one that lines the oral cavity, the esophagus, and in women the vagina. So stratified squamous epithelium of non-keratinizing type is present in the oral cavity, esophagus, and in the vagina. So these layers are present in these three different organs of the non-keratinizing type. While the keratinizing type, why we are called it as keratinizing type? Because of the production of the protein, which is the keratin, that is present on the that is present in the skin surface. So in this location, what is the function? The surface cells are living and they make up the mucous membranes of these organs. So we know that, for example, if we see in the oral cavity or in the esophagus or in the vagina, there is a production of mucus. So what this stratified squamous epithelium is doing is, this stratified squamous epithelium, the upper surface of the cells is living, and because of that they continuously produce mucus. So they secrete mucus like substance in the oral cavity or in the esophagus or in the vagina of the female organ, and in all its body location, this tissue also provides a barrier to the microorganisms, because the cells of which it is made are very close together, like they are tightly packed, and therefore it does not allow the entry to the microorganism and act as a barrier for the entry of the microorganism. So therefore these tissues are present in the sites where we have a mucus like secretion, and where certain substances, like for this mucus for example, provides the protection against the microorganisms also, because it acts as a barrier against the entry of the microorganism. So in this figure we can see that it is a multi-layered cell, so it is stratified. This one is the stratified, that is layered, because it consists of multiple layers of the cells, one above the other. So this is an example. So this figure shows, this is an H&E, that is hemotoxylin and eosin stained image, which we visualized under the microscope. So you can see here that the epithelial tissues, as I mentioned, are provided with the blood supply with the help of the connective tissue which is present beneath them. And you can see here that it is a layer of cells, not a single cell, but it is a layer of cells, unlike the simple squamous epithelium, where there is just the single cells that are present in vicinity of each other. While in this case, you can see that it is a layer of the cells which are present one over the other. So this is an H&E image of the esophagus, where the stratified squamous epithelium is present. Next, we have transitional epithelium. So in this epithelium, basement membrane becomes invisible due to stretching. So one of the very important properties of the transitional epithelium is their property of stretching. So wherever we require a stretch in the tissues, their transitional epithelium must be present. So it is also known as, so it is usually present in the urinary system, where we require the expansion or the stretching of the urinary bladder, where the urine gets collected. So in this epithelium, 4 to 6 layers of the cells are present. So it is again a kind of stratified epithelium, since it is a layered one. Right? So innermost layer of cell is composed of tube-like cells, and middle 2 to 4 layers are consist of pear-shaped cells or polyhedral cells. So it is like this. So the middle layers consist of polyhedral cells and outermost 1 or 2 layers are oval-shaped cells. So they have different types of cells, different shapes of cells that represent in different layers, and the different shape of the cells appears only in the resting stage when there is no stretching. When the tissue is stretched, all of them becomes the flattened. So you cannot visualize different types, different shapes of the cells when the tissue is in the stretched condition. While if it is in the resting stage, you can clearly see that it consists of many different types of cells that are cubical or they are polyhedral and oval in shape. Cells are interconnected by interdigitation. That is, so suppose if this is one cell, then it interdigitate into the another cell. So with the help of interdigitation, that is forming a finger-like structure, these cells are connected. So these cells are stretchable and waterproof, and therefore they are usually present in the urinary system where the urine gets collected. So we know that urinary bladder has a very good power of expansion. It can stretch a lot as compared to the other different organs of the body because of the presence of the epithelium, which is the transitional epithelium that allows it the stretching property. For example, it is present in the renal pelvis, it is present in the ureter, urinary bladder, or in the proximal part of the male urethra. So in these cases, transitional epithelium is present where it allows the stretching of the muscles or stretching of the organs. And during the stretching, as I mentioned, basement membranes become invisible and almost all the cells become flattened in shape, irrespective of their original shape. So transitional epithelium is present in the renal pelvis. It is present in the ureter. That is it is present in the ureter, it is present in the urinary bladder and in the urethra. This is an again H&E stained image of transitional epithelium. So this is a free surface of the urinary bladder, which is marked here. And we can see that it is a layer one. So it is a stratified. It is an example of stratified squamous epithelium. You can also call it as urinary epithelium because it is usually present only in the urinary system. Next, we have the simple cuboidal epithelium. So as the name suggests, simple means single layer and cuboidal means the shape of the cells is cube-like. So you can see in the figure also that that the cell is cube-like in shape and it is just the single layer that expands in this manner. It is not the one layer of cell expanding over the other. So therefore, simple cuboidal epithelium is a single layer of cube-shaped cells. This type of tissue makes up the functional unit of thyroid glands and the salivary glands. These are examples of glandular epithelium. So since they are examples of glandular epithelium, their function is secretion. As I mentioned, the function of the gland is to secrete. In these glands, the cuboidal cells are arranged in small spheres and they secrete into the cavity which is formed by the sphere. So like this, they are arranged and they secrete into the cavity which is formed by the sphere of the cell. So cells are arranged like this and they secrete into the cavity which is formed by the cells. So in thyroid gland, the cuboidal epithelium secretes the thyroid hormone, thyroxine, for example. So it is present in the vesicles. So you can see that in the thyroid gland, simple cuboidal epithelium is present. Similarly, in the salivary glands, it secretes the saliva. In the sweat glands, for example, it is the secretory unit of the sweat glands. So the secretory unit of the sweat glands is the simple cuboidal epithelium that helps in the secretion. Cuboidal epithelium also makes up the portion of the kidney tubules and it is also present in the gonads. In gonads, cuboidal cells divides to form the eggs and sperm. So this is a function of cuboidal cells in the gonads. For example, in case of female, it is the egg, and in case of male, it is the sperm. So wherever the secretion is required, usually the cuboidal squamous, simple cuboidal epithelium is an example of glandular epithelium. And for example, it has a function of secretion, like for example, in the salivary glands, it helps in the secretion of the saliva, or with the help of the sweat glands, it helps in the secretion of the sweat. Also, it is present in the thyroid gland, where it helps in the secretion of a hormone. So wherever there is a secretion of hormone, for example, in the thyroid glands, it is the simple cuboidal epithelium. So the glandular epithelium or the glands are the modifications of the simple cuboidal epithelium. Then we have the simple columnar epithelium. So as the name suggests, simple means single layer and columnar means column shaped. So in this, what will be the shape of these types of cells? It will be the simple, which is the single layer, and the column shaped. That is the elongated cells, in which the nucleus is usually present in the lower portion. So columnar cells are taller, as I mentioned, then they are wide and are specialized for secretion and absorption. So usually on the surface of the columnar cells, a structure which is known as the cilia is present. So this cilia-like structure helps in the absorption, and they are modified for the secretion and the absorption. So the stomach lining is made up of columnar epithelium that secretes the gastric juices for the digestion. And the lining of the small intestine that also secretes the digestive enzymes. Also, they can absorb the food products or the end products of digestion. And in this, the modification is the microvilli. So this microvilli, which is present on the surface of the intestine, are the modifications of the simple columnar epithelium. These microvilli, the structure of the microvilli provides or facilitates the higher absorption of the food or the efficient absorption of the food by the cells of the small intestine. And these microscopic folds greatly increases how they facilitate the efficient absorption of the food by greatly increasing the surface area for absorption. So what will be the structure of microvilli? For example, this is the intestine. So the microvilli is like this, which is present on the surface of the intestine. So this structure facilitates the higher absorption of food by increasing in the surface area. So the surface area for the absorption of the food increase, the food can get absorbed from all these sides. So if instead of this, it will be like this. So the surface area will be reduced for the absorption of food. But the microvilli-like structure helps in the or facilitates the higher absorption of the food. Another type of columnar cell is in the goblet cell, which is again a unicellular gland. So glands can be a modification of simple columnar or simple cuboidal, as I mentioned in this case. So goblet cells secrete mucus, and they are found in the lining of the intestine and the lining of the respiratory tract, such as trachea. So in trachea and in the intestine, goblet cells are found. What is the function of goblet cells? The function of goblet cells is to secrete the mucus on the inner lining of the tissues, like for example, in the lining of the intestine or in the respiratory tract, for example, trachea. What is the function of mucus? This mucus helps in interacting with the microorganism or dust particles, and therefore preventing the entry of the dust into the system or entry of the microorganism into the system. So they act as the line of barrier for the entry of microorganisms. Also, what is the function of mucus in the intestine? So in the intestine or in the in the intestine, it prevents the intestine from getting destroyed by their own digestive enzymes. So therefore, the mucus helps in preventing the destruction of the intestinal lining by their own digestive enzymes by acting as the barrier of the interaction with the cells with the digestive enzymes. So it can be brush bordered columnar epithelium, for example, microvilli that forms the brush border that are present in the as I mentioned, that are present in the intestine and increases the surface area for the absorption. So the food can get absorbed from all the sides. Therefore, efficient absorption of the food happens. Then we can have the glandular columnar epithelium. Glandular columnar epithelium, as I mentioned, it helps in the secretion. So they secrete the mucus. They have the goblet cells. These goblet cells help in the secretion of the structure, which is known as the mucus. This mucus is present in the intestine. It lines the intestine and in the trachea. So, simple columnar epithelium is present in the microvilli of the intestine and in the, if I talk about the glandular type, so it is present in the intestine or in the trachea. Then we have ciliated epithelium also. So, the ciliated epithelium consists of columnar cells. So, when on the columnar cells, the structures known as cilia are present, it is called as the ciliated epithelium. So they have cilia on their free surface. The function of the cilia is to sweep the materials across the cell surface. So these cilia helps in the movement of the substances towards the cell surface. And it lines the nasal cavity. So these cilia are present in the nasal cavity. They are present in the larynx, which is the sound box. They are present in the trachea. They are present in the large bronchial tubes. The cilia sweeps the mucus. So the mucus which is secreted by the glandular epithelium in the trachea, it is swept up by the cilia and therefore help in trapping the dust and bacteria from the inhaled air towards the pharynx to be swallowed. So whatever the bacteria or the dust which is being which comes in the contact with the mucus is being swept away by the ciliated epithelium towards the pharynx. So this pharynx allows the swelling of this trapped dust or bacteria, where the bacteria gets killed or destroyed by the acidic juices which are being released in our stomach. For example, they are destroyed by the hydrochloric acid which is released in the stomach, so thereby preventing the infections of the bacteria. The air that reaches the lungs is almost entirely free of pathogens and particulate pollution by the process of the action of the cilia. Another location of the ciliated epithelium in women is the lining of the fallopian tubes. So this fallopian tube lining, these fallopian tubes are the part of the woman reproductive system. So there the ciliated epithelium is present. What is the function of ciliated epithelium here is? The cilia here sweep the ovum. The ovum which does not have any proper. So the next is the ciliated epithelium. So as the name suggests, ciliated epithelium consists of columnar cells. That is, they are elongated cells that composed of cilia. That have cilia on their surface. And what is the function of cilia? The function of the cilia is to sweep the materials across the cell surface. So it wipes or it sweeps the material towards the cell surface. So ciliated epithelium lines the nasal cavity, it lines the larynx, trachea and large bronchial tubes. So the function of cilia in the nasal cavity is to sweep the mucus. So whenever any dust particle or microorganism like bacteria is inhaled with the inhaled air, then what happens is with the help of the mucus which is present, it gets trapped into the mucus which is present in the nasal cavity. After this, the cilia which is present in the nasal cavity swept this mucus towards the pharynx, and so that allows the swelling of the bacteria or the dust particles, and these bacteria then further gets destroyed by the hydrochloric acid which is present in the stomach, preventing the entry of the bacteria or the infection of the bacteria in the body. So this is the function of the ciliated epithelium which is present in the nasal cavity. So the air that reaches the lungs is now almost entirely free of pathogens and particulate pollution because of the presence of this ciliated epithelium. Therefore, the ciliated columnar epithelium prevents the entry of the pathogens or the particulate pollution, like for example dust particles, into the lungs. Another location of the ciliated epithelium in women is the lining of the fallopian tubes. So fallopian tubes are the part of the reproductive system that consist of, like, this fallopian tube is a part of the reproductive system that consists of ciliated columnar epithelium. Now, what is the function of ciliated columnar epithelium is that the cilia which lines the the cilia that lines the fallopian tubes helps in sweeping the ovum. Ovum, which is secreted by the female reproductive system, is being swept away by the cilia which is present in the fallopian tubes. So ovum does not have any self-locomotory properties. It cannot move on its own. Therefore, it is swept up by the cilia towards the uterus, where it gets fertilized by the sperm. So this sweeping of the ovum takes place with the help of the presence of the ciliated columnar epithelium that lines the surface of the fallopian tubes. So these are the examples. So this is the ciliated columnar epithelium, how it appears. Ciliated columnar epithelium appears like a normal elongated cell structures, elongated cells that have a nucleus. And these are the cilia which are present on the surface. So they are present in the fallopian tubes, for example. As I mentioned, they are present in the nasal tract, nasal cavity. They are also present in the brain ventricles. So what is the function of brain cilia in the brain ventricles is that it helps in sweeping the CSF, that is the cerebrospinal fluid. So in brain ventricles, it helps in the sweeping the CSF, that is the cerebrospinal fluid, which is present in the brain. So this is the summary of the different types of epithelial tissues which we discussed. The first one is the simple squamous that consists of one layer of flat cells. It is present in the alveoli. They are thin and smooth and are present in the alveoli of the lungs. Because they are thin, they allows or they permit the diffusion of gases. They are present in the capillaries. Now in capillaries again, because they are thin, they allow the permit or exchange of the materials. And since it is a smooth, it also prevents the abnormal blood clotting. So by understanding the structure of any type of epithelium, we can understand the location and function of that particular epithelium. Stratified squamous that consist of many layers of cells. Surface cells are flat, lower cells are rounded, and lower layer undergoes the mitosis. This is important, that it is the lower layer that undergoes mitosis. And suppose if there is a worn-off of the cells which are present on the upper layer, then it is replaced by the new cells which are formed by the mitosis of the lower cells. Now, since it consists of many layers, its function is in the protection. So it is present on the upper surface of the skin, which is known as the epidermis. The surface cells are dead and they provide a barrier to the pathogens. They also line esophagus, vagina, where the surface cells are living. So this is important. It is of two types, as I mentioned, keratinized and non-keratinized. So in keratinized type, like for example, which is present on the skin, surface cells are dead, and in the one which is non-keratinized, for example, in the esophagus or in the vagina, the surface cells are living and they produce mucus, thus providing the barrier to the pathogens. The next is the transitional. So this transitional is also a stratified type, which consists of many layers of cells, and surface cells change from rounded to flat. For example, so it has the power of stretching. So transitional cells can stretch. So they are present in the lining of urinary bladder. It permits the expansion without tearing the lining. So it provides the power of stretchability where the cells can expand without any tear. Next is the cuboidal, where there is a one layer of cube-shaped cells. Which, for example, it is present in the thyroid gland that secretes thyroxine, salivary glands that secrete saliva, sweat gland that secretes sweat, or it is present in the kidney tubules that permits the reabsorption of the useful materials back into the blood. Next is the columnar, where the shape of the cells is column shaped. In this, the shape of the cells is cuboidal, but it is a single layer. So in this columnar, it can be present in the lining of the stomach, where it helps in the secretion of gastric juice. It can be present in the lining of the small intestine, where it secretes the enzymes that helps in the digestion of the food and absorbs the end products, for example, the microvilli that increases the absorption of the food. Next, we have the ciliated epithelium, where the one layer of columnar cells have cilia on their free surface. For example, as I mentioned, the lining of the trachea and the lining of the fallopian tube that sweeps the ovum towards the uterus. So these are the different types of epithelial tissues. The last is the glands, which are also the modifications of the epithelial tissue. So all glands are composed of epithelial tissue. Most of these are already covered in the earlier points. Like, for example, we discussed about sweat glands, salivary glands, which are a type of which are a type of cuboidal epithelium. Or we discussed about the lining which is present in the stomach due to the columnar epithelium that also secretes certain enzymes. So these are glands. Glands can be originate from all the three germ layers. We know that there are three germinal layers. So during the development, there are three germinal layers which are formed: the ectoderm, mesoderm, which is the middle one, and then the endoderm. So ectoderm, for example, gives rise to the sweat glands. Mesoderm give rise to the gonads that leads to the formation of sperm and ovum in males and females respectively. Then endoderm is the thyroid gland. So on the basis of the number of cells, it can be a unicellular or it can be a multicellular gland. So the unicellular, that consists of single cell. Uni means single, so it consists of a single cell. And multicellular means where multiple cells are involved. So example of unicellular gland is the goblet cells that helps in the secretion of the mucus, and the Paneth cells. So in this figure, you can see it is the type of unicellular gland where a single cell is acting as the gland or is helping in the secretion, right? Secretion of mucus. The next is the multicellular gland, where the multiple cells are involved. These multiple cells help in the secretion of the substances. For example, all the glands except the goblet cells and the Paneth cells comes under the multicellular glands. Unicellular means one cell, as I mentioned. Goblet cells are an example of unicellular glands, and they forms the lining of the respiratory and digestive tract. Their secretion is mucus. The next is the multicellular, so which is made up of many similar cells, or it can be made up of variety of cells. It is of three types. Exocrine, as the name suggests, it takes the secretion away from the gland to the sites of its function. Exo. Salivary glands, for example, secrete saliva that is carried by the ducts to the oral cavity. So salivary glands are not present in the oral cavity, but the saliva is secreted in the oral cavity because of the ducts that carried the saliva. Sweat gland secretes sweat and that is transported by the ducts to the skin surface, and where it gets evaporated by excess body heat. Similarly, the gastric glands of the stomach lining contain different kinds of which produce hydrochloric acid and the enzyme pepsin. So these are examples of exocrine glands. The next are the endocrine glands that are ductless. That is, they do not have ducts, and therefore they secrete substances or the group of chemicals which are called as the hormones, which enters the capillaries and are circulated throughout the body. Hormones then bring about specific effects in their target organs. Examples of the endocrine glands are the thyroid gland that secretes the thyroxine hormone, adrenal glands that secretes adrenaline, and pituitary glands. The last type of the gland is the heterocrine or the mixed gland that has both endocrine and exocrine part. For example, the pancreas and gonads that secrete certain chemicals that are ductless or that secrete certain compounds which are secreted with the help of the ducts. For example, if I talk about the pancreas, it secretes certain compounds that are released into the body with the help of the ducts, while there are certain hormones like, for example, the insulin, which is the exocrine part of this gland. So these glands are nothing but they are the modified epithelium tissues. They are the modified epithelial tissues which are modified for the secretion of certain chemical substances that have a particular function. So These are the exocrine glands, which are ductless, which consists of ducts, and they release chemical secretions with the help of the ducts. While in the endocrine glands that are ductless, the hormones are secreted into the blood directly without any duct. So with this, I would like to end today's session. In the next lecture, we will take up with the connective tissues. Thank you for attending it.